Okay, everyone. Well, welcome. It's day one of the Trump trial. I'm really excited. I've been in a really good mood. I woke up at like 2:45. I'm sure that you guys are a little wound up as well, but it feels like we've been waiting for this for so long, and now it's arrived in one form, at least. 3 more to go. There were a lot of questions on the Patreon feed this morning about other issues unrelated to the Trump trial, and I just want to tell everybody that today we're just going to focus on like what's happened so far on day one. And I do want to remind everyone that my plan for the duration of this trial is to be here as many times a day as I need to be to make things clear for this audience. All right. So I'm just going to start by saying this. Everybody who is a subscriber on the Patreon feed is going to get early notification of every time I go live. And so if you're not yet over there at patreon.com/resistance live, subscription started as little as $2 a month. I think by the time we get to the end of that this week, that's going to be like a nickel a broadcast. So I really encourage you, if you support this work, if it helps you, to get on over there and subscribe. Okay. First things first, I'm coming to you as always from occupied Tongva territory here in Southern California. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a pink sleeveless turtleneck sweater. I am sitting as always in front of my plant and my standing lamp and my big cushy chair, and my pronouns are she, her. Okay. So we are in the first, I guess, 2.5 hours now of the Trump trial. Technically, the trial hasn't quite yet started because we're not yet in jury selection. However, what the judge has been dealing with this morning so far are pretrial evidentiary motions. Now, I have to clear something up, because there's a commentator on MSNBC who shall remain nameless, who has spent about the last half an hour saying that there's something wrong with the way that this has been handled and that this is like going to make the jury pool very uncomfortable. That is just flat out false. And I say this as somebody who's been called to jury duty in New York City multiple times. The jury pool right now is literally just like sitting in a room watching television and hanging out on their phones, which, by the way, is a part of being called for jury selection, whether you're called for the Trump trial or anything else. So the idea that they're somehow being like misled or this isn't fair or it's not right, it's just like flat out inaccurate. All right. But on top of it, many, many times when I was trying a case or I was headed into an evidentiary hearing, I would have the judge ruling like that morning on various significant pieces of evidence. So there's nothing unusual about this, particularly in state court. Okay. I will just tell you that, like, back when I was a lawyer in Washington, D.C., before I moved to kind of like my Wall Street practice in New York, and I was practicing in state courts in D.C. and Virginia, this happened all the time. All right. So again, nothing unusual about having evidentiary rulings the morning of a trial. It's gone on a little longer than I think folks expected. But on the other hand, the issues that are being ruled upon are really substantial here. Okay. So, let's just talk about a couple of the things that are being ruled on right now. And literally, when I went on the air, Judge Merchan was in the middle of trying to decide whether or not Michael Cohen's prior guilty pleas were going to be admissible on direct by the prosecution. Those of you who were watching on our Progressive Coffee Hour yesterday for our Patreon-only subscribers know that I talked about Michael Cohen as a witness and how we would expect the issue of his prior guilty pleas to be handled. And I've talked previously about the fact that this is something that, like, any seasoned prosecutor or litigator for that matter knows how to do. You want to take the sting out of the adverse testimony in advance so that it's not like a surprise kind of situation on cross-examination. All right. So we're hearing a lot of requests for various information about Michael Cohen to be entered. And we'll see where Judge Merchan comes out on that. Now, the other things that have been up for discussion this morning were the second Merchan recusal motion, which was just duplicative of the first, as we talked about yesterday. Merchan denied that out of hand. No, not going to recuse himself from the bench. No conflict of interest. No reason to do that. He ruled that information about the National Enquirer, and they are both positive pieces on Trump during the 2016 campaign and their negative pieces about his opponents, is all going to come in. This is really good because it kind of completes the trajectory of the story about the National Enquirer's role in the catch and kill scheme. That evidence is coming in. We had evidence about Karen McDougal, who is the Playboy playmate who Trump allegedly had a multi-month affair with. Evidence about her will come in, but what will not come in is that Melania was pregnant while the affair was going on. The reason why that will not come in is because Judge Merchan is doing something very smart here. He is admitting evidence that is only relevant to the charges at hand and is not admitting evidence that could be deemed to be just like salacious or things that would just really make Trump look bad. I mean, all of this is going to make Trump look bad, but if it has no real direct relevance to the case, there's no reason for that to be admitted. So I want people to just understand that what I'm seeing from Judge Merchan is what I've told all of you that I have been seeing from him throughout this entire process, which is that he is exceedingly careful. He is fair and balanced, and he is no nonsense. All right. So threading this particular needle is a really good indication of the fact that he is committed to giving Trump a fair trial while simultaneously only admitting the evidence that is relevant to the charges. And this is really smart, because the other thing that it does is it preserves the possibility that if Trump is convicted, it will not be overturned on appeal. Okay. The same is true, by the way, for the Access Hollywood tape. Lots of questions this morning on our Patreon subscriber feed about what the judge had done with regard to the Access Hollywood tape. So here's how the ruling came down. The ruling came down that what was said on the Access Hollywood tape and what was said after the fact about the Access Hollywood tape will come into evidence. The tape itself will not be played. And again, the reason for this is that the tape itself, and I get this, sounds exceedingly salacious and kind of enraging. Like, I had my own moment this morning when I was thinking about this again and reading the live coverage, where I was saying, like, I was so angry when that tape dropped, right? And that's the kind of reaction that the judge is trying to avoid being something that would influence the jury to consider something outside the scope of the evidence. So they will be able to read what was said on the Access Hollywood tape, but they will not be able to play Trump's voice. And the other thing that's really interesting about this is that emails about the response inside the Trump campaign in 2016 to the Access Hollywood tape are going to be admissible. Emails between Hope Hicks and Kellyanne Conway. It's crazy that her ex-husband is sitting in the courtroom while he's sitting in the anteroom right now reporting on this. The responses about we're just going to deny, which all goes to their concern about any further breaking news stories about Trump and his misogyny and his horrendous conduct toward women could cost them the 2016 election. That directly relates to the catch and kill scheme that is at issue here in this trial. All right. So that's how that decision was made. And then the other thing that is not going to come in is sort of rumored speculation evidence about Trump's prior sexual assaults. We haven't yet heard much about the E. Jean Carroll case. His testimony from the deposition in E. Jean Carroll has been excluded, but we don't know yet whether or not the prosecution is going to ask to admit his conviction, well, not conviction, but his liability in that case, which is, of course, a civil case. So we're waiting to see how that goes. Now, the biggest breaking news of the morning so far is that right before there was a break that was taken at this point, probably about a half an hour ago, the prosecution indicated that they are going to be seeking sanctions under the GAG order. They have multiple bases for doing this already. There was a post on Truth Social last Wednesday that did not name Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, but referred to both of them as sleaze bags. You'll remember that in the expanded GAG order, Donald Trump is now allowed to comment on any witnesses in the case. And then he literally named Michael Cohen over the weekend as, you know, a convicted felon and unreliable. And that is also a violation of the GAG order. So the question right now is whether or not the statements that he has made, which have violated the GAG order, are going to result in some form of sanctions. I'm going to remind you all that the judge already warned the defense team that one of the sanctions that they could be facing if he violated the GAG order was that they would not be privy to juror identifying information. Trump can't have it, but the lawyers can. Okay. What may happen now when we move into the jury selection process, which could happen now at any minute, will be that the jurors will only be identified by juror number to the defense. That's one sanction we could see. But I'm also just going to point out here that if I was on the prosecution, I would be asking for much more significant sanctions than that against Donald Trump, up to and including a potential time in jail. Now, I don't think that's going to happen today, but I'm going to tell you all that I think at the bare minimum, what Judge Merchan is going to do is say to him, you do this again, and the possibility of pretrial detention is going to become very real. And the sanction may very well be on the juror basis for now as a preliminary sanction, and then we will have to see what happens next. But they're filing a motion on that. All right, now, I have to remind everybody, because again, lots of questions this morning on the Patreon feed about Trump's statements outside of court this morning. Those do not violate the GAG order. The GAG order is very narrow. It does not say that Trump can't speak, okay? It does not say he can't even comment on the case. It says he can't comment on the witnesses. He can't do anything that is designed to interfere with the jury pool. And he can't attack the judge's family, the district attorney's family, any court staff, any witnesses, and the like, okay? But he can go out there and say, this is a political prosecution. That's not a violation of the GAG order. I'm honored to be here, was one of the things that he said this morning. That's not a violation of the gag order, all right? So it's very, very specific in terms of what he is and is not allowed to say. And the specific statements that he made last week and over the weekend with regard to the witnesses are in direct violation of the terms of the gag order. So what we're going to have to see right now is what happens next, all right? It's a very significant moment in this trial. And I will just say that if sanctions actually drop on Donald Trump as a result of this, in addition to the fact that we're already in an unprecedented moment because we've literally never had a past president on trial for crimes, that will also be a precedent-setting event in American history. So we will have to see. Now, for everybody who's like complaining, one more time, I have to remind you all of something. This is a criminal trial. And one of the things that the judge has to be keenly aware of is not making any mistakes that could result in the case being overturned on appeal. So for everybody who's like, I'm so tired of him getting another chance to violate a gag order, I got to remind you all that if the judge doesn't rule in a way here that preserves the fact that Donald Trump, like every other defendant, deserves a fair trial, he could be overturned if Donald Trump is convicted. All right. And we don't want that. I would much prefer to have a situation here where Donald Trump is given one more chance to violate a gag order than to have him convicted and then have it overturned on appeal because of an allegation that this judge was biased or had interfered in the possibility of the trial being fair and equitable, of Donald Trump getting a fair trial. Like, that's exactly what we don't want. All right. So take a breath. It's going to be okay. And we'll see what the judge does next. But I'm going to tell you, this isn't going to slide completely. That you can be guaranteed of, because the judge has already warned them of what was coming next if he violated the gag order. And it took him like a day to do it. Okay, I want to talk for a second about what we're seeing from Trump, because I do want to point out that for purposes of the 2024 campaign, this is a very significant moment, and not just because it's a criminal trial. One of the things that has already been pointed out this morning is that Trump looks like garbage. I mean, I don't know if anybody has seen the pictures of him yet. Well, I guess you have if you've seen the thumbnail on this broadcast so far today, but he looks like he hasn't slept in several days. The other thing that I want to remind everyone of is that his handlers have been keeping him pretty much locked down, except for a couple of campaign events in the last few weeks. And there's been a lot of speculation as to why that's the case. Some of it having to do with like the evidence of what we're seeing already of his mental decline. And so one of the things that has already been observed in the courtroom this morning is that he is slumped over, he is hunched, he's been almost falling asleep at certain moments, which is really not a good sign when you're on trial for like crimes, and that his physical behavior just doesn't look healthy, okay? Now that's all speculation, of course, from the people who are sitting in the courtroom and in the press anteroom where they are apparently shoulder to shoulder this morning. But I do want people to understand that he's going to have eyes on him for the entire time that he's sitting in this courtroom until it's over. And that in and of itself, and I said this on Threads this morning, is going to give us a lot more insight into how he's actually doing versus what the campaign is putting out there about his like stability, his mental health, his physical health, his capacity. I mean, like all of this is going to be readily observable by people who are in the press or in the courtroom. And that in and of itself is going to be significant. Now, I'm just going to say one thing here. I am not a fan of the conspiracy theory stuff about Trump and drugs. And you all know that on this feed, we sort of have this rule that we don't engage in conspiracy theories without evidence. All right. And it is perfectly normal for somebody who's about to go on trial for like 34 counts that could carry a sentence of 4 years apiece to not sleep the night before. All right. And I want to be very measured about the way that we discuss this. But I do think that there is going to be a lot more observation about his state generally, mentally, physically, emotionally, as a result of this trial than what we have been given the opportunity to see up until now in this campaign. And that in and of itself is going to be something that will influence folks' perceptions of him as the case progresses. All right. Very interesting moment. And I will just say, mainstream media is live streaming this nonstop. For those who have been asking, by the way, on Threads, this is, of course, not being televised and there is no audio. However, press in the anteroom do have access to their computers, not cell phones, but they clearly have a means to get information about what's happening out. Katie Fang is live threading this. Inner City Press, which is a local New York City press reporter who covers only New York City courts, is live streaming it as well. And then there's ongoing commentary from people like Lisa Rubin, who's running in and out of the courtroom, Vaughn Hilliard, who was running in and out of the courtroom on MSNBC. There's various means to be able to kind of track what's happening, all right? In addition to the fact that the New York Times, I know, is live streaming all of this, and so is the Washington Post. So feel free to follow along with any of these, but I'm also following along and giving you like my observations based on what I'm reading as far as trial procedure, how things normally go in the New York courts, what the takeaways are from what the judge is doing. So you can also follow me, because as long as I'm not like, having to get my kids ready for school, I'm going to be like live here on social media and as much as I can on YouTube, giving you guys live feedback. Okay. So it's a really, really interesting moment so far in terms of what we're observing. Now, somebody asked a question that is very relevant to this about a thread that George Conway posted over the weekend about the ways in which files are handled in New York Supreme criminal court. Okay. This really shocked me actually, because my experience in New York courts is that everything is electronically filed. Now, keep in mind, I was the civil lawyer, right? There were cases that I handled that also had a criminal component to them, particularly federal securities actions, where there was like a shareholders derivative action and somebody was also being tried for like stock manipulation. But one of the things that is surprising about this is that apparently the docket doesn't really exist in New York Supreme Criminal Court. It's like a file of papers, and they filter through it to find the indictment and to find like the arraignment proceedings and like, pretrial statements and everything, which is nuts. And so one of the things that people should be aware of here is that organizationally, this court, apparently, at least from a docket standpoint, is sort of like back in the mid 20th century. Now, do I think that's going to have a really big impact on how the case proceeds here? Probably not. But I do want people to understand that like different courts have different procedures. Different courts have different means of keeping records. Different courts have different means even of how like you file motions. Sometimes you do it by letter. You have to ask permission in this court, according to Judge Merchan, to file any motion because he doesn't want frivolous motions from Donald Trump's team. And so they're filing letters first, and then they're filing motions if they have permission. So how this all plays out is not really directly relevant to what's going to happen in the courtroom, but that is what has happened in the context of George's observation about the fact that like they're kind of not very organized in the criminal court clerk's office on this stuff. They're like not really doing everything by e-file. Like pretty much everything else is handled in New York, whether in federal or civil court. So that's the deal there. Now, I do want to talk about sentencing for a minute, because we did have a lot of questions on the Patreon feed over the weekend and today about prospective sentences. And this is one of those moments where I have to warn you all to be very careful about where you're getting your information. Because, for instance, yesterday on Threads, one of our followers here posted something that was from an anonymous account claiming to be a lawyer, saying that there was no time, that Donald Trump was never going to see any jail time. And what was attached to that was a chart that had been screenshot. I found the original screenshot off of a law firm's website. Okay. And it was very easy to misread the chart because of commas. Like if you don't understand grammar and you don't understand how commas can be applied when you're reading a statute or something like that, this sort of thing could be very confusing, because it looked like for a Class E felony for Donald Trump on this chart, it was no jail time, probation, 1 1/3 to 4 years. Okay. If you read all of that together, you would think that for a Class E felony in New York, you don't do jail time. You just get probation of between 1.3 to 4 years. That's false. Okay. The options for a sentence for this crime for each count, and I'm going to remind you all, 34 separate counts of fraudulent business records in the first degree. Okay. The way in which sentencing can work here is everything from $1,000 fine all the way up to 4 years in prison. And because I had time on my hands yesterday on a Sunday, went and did some legal research on this, because I was really curious about first-time offenders and what has happened historically with this particular charge and how it has resulted in sentences, what those sentences have looked like. So I ran a search through the legal databases, and I got 1,000 hits on cases where fraudulent business records, fraud in business records filings in the first degree resulted for first-time offenders in up to 4 years in prison. And it has happened for people who have literally never committed a crime before, that in conjunction with other allegations, and sometimes not, they've gotten anywhere from 3 months account all the way up to 4 years. So I don't want anybody to be running around here and, let me get this guy. Thanks for the troll alert, you guys. Bye-bye. Bye. I always have so much fun blocking the trolls in real time. For those of you who are new, this is a regular event here, where we just happen to block the folks who come on here just to talk about how they think Joe Biden should be in prison, which he shouldn't. Okay, so to go back to this, there is a strong likelihood here that if he is convicted, let alone on multiple counts, okay, that he will be doing jail time. And I also just want to point out to everybody that one of the things that happens in sentencing in New York, as it happens everywhere else, is that when a judge considers what the sentence should be, they consider what are called aggravating factors, which would warrant a higher prison sentence, and mitigating factors, which might warrant a lower prison sentence, okay? And one of the things that can be mitigating, you're all gonna laugh, is remorse and acknowledging your crime and apologizing for it and, making attestations that you will never do it again, right? We're not going to see any of that from Trump. To the contrary, there's aggravating factors here that would weigh in favor of a much higher sentence, okay? Because he has no remorse. He isn't going to apologize. He's not admitting he's done anything wrong. He has not accepted accountability, right? And on top of it, he's facing down all these other crimes. Now, the judge cannot consider crimes that he hasn't been convicted of as aggravating factors, but we are in a situation where there's a pattern and practice of criminal conduct by this defendant, at least as alleged, all right? So there's all sorts of other factors going into this. Now, I will just say this because somebody's commenting here. Eliza Orlins is a friend of mine. So this is one of those moments where cross commentary comes to a head. Just in the same way that I don't agree with Chuck Rosenberg on everything that he said this morning on MSNBC. I love Eliza. She's amazing. She's brilliant. She's a great public defender. But I also disagree with her analysis on this because we're currently in front of a judge that really has shown himself to have no time for Trump's nonsense. And so while I want everybody to have reasonable expectations here, again, this is why I'm talking about the range, anything from no jail time all the way up to 4 years. If he's convicted on 34 counts of fraudulent business records in the first degree, the idea that there's just not going to be any jail time on the table is kind of not accurate, all right? And I can guarantee you that Alvin Bragg's team has already gamed this out, all right? Now, I have to remind you also that one of the things I love about Eliza is that as a public defender, she is a huge advocate for all the ways in which our criminal justice system acts through white supremacy, through misogyny. She's a huge advocate on all the ways in which the criminal justice system needs change. She actually ran for Alvin Bragg's job in the last election cycle, okay? She's a genius at this. But also we need to recognize that we're in a situation here with a defendant who has no remorse, who will do it again, who is already violating the gag orders, who has already been found liable for civil fraud to the tune of $500 million in the state of New York for a similar fraudulent business records type of allegation, albeit not in furtherance of election interference. And I don't know, man. I look at this and I see it through the lens of a DA and I see it through the lens of a judge. And I would not be surprised to see prison time here. But again, I have to remind you all of this. Great lawyers differ. The law is not written in stone, and it's how it's applied to the facts. And so for everybody that you're watching who's out here right now who is a lawyer, you should understand that all of us come to it with our own approaches and our own experience. I mean, I come to this as someone who had 15 years of trial experience in New York courts. So, I see it through a very specific lens, and I've practiced in front of some of these judges that are litigating cases, managing cases that involve Donald Trump. I've also litigated against Donald Trump himself in an adversary proceeding in bankruptcy in the 3rd Atlantic City bankruptcy. So I have a deep understanding of the way all these things work. And I do, I will never discount Eliza's opinion because I think she's a genius. And also, I happen to disagree with her on this. So we'll have to see how this all plays out, all right? And again, I want to remind everybody that this is not a small case. This is a case with 34 counts of fraudulent business records in furtherance of election interference, each of which could carry a 4-year sentence. Yes, he is a first-time offender, but I'm just going to tell you all, I think the factors here weighing in favor of a prison sentence are much stronger than the factors weighing against it. We'll see, all right? We'll see. Now, Trump is in the courtroom, as you all know. He's going to be there the whole time, as we've already discussed. There's going to be a lot of, regular gamesmanship about what this signifies and what this signifies and what the judge is going to do and what else, what he might not. I also just want to remind you all here that it's really important throughout this process, and this is kind of where I started on this, to get your news from reliable sources. Please do not rely on anonymous accounts. Do not rely on accounts that like don't have a name attached. Like you all can go look up my bar license. I mean, you can. I don't know that it'll be fun for you, but you can go do it, right? You can find out that I'm actually a licensed New York attorney. And when I was admitted, right? All that stuff is really relevant because if it's an anonymous account claiming to be a lawyer, sharing information that they claim is accurate, you gotta take a breath because, you know, fundamentally it could be anybody. And we're really in a moment right now, by the way, in the middle of this trial and with everything that happened over the weekend with Iran and Israel, where like trolling, bots, disinformation is flooding the social media sphere. So one of the reasons why I'm here is so that, you know, particularly if you're a subscriber on Patreon, you guys can ask me questions and you can ask for 2 hours in advance of every broadcast so that I can answer them real time on the air. And that's so you get reliable information. And every once in a while I make a mistake. And when I do, I correct myself. It doesn't happen very often, but it's happened in the past 7 years on like a handful of occasions. So please just make sure that you are aware of where your information is coming from. Not everything is reliable. I will also just say that I saw a couple of these like aggregator news sites like Raw Story that are not actually like legitimate journalists. They're just regurgitating things for clickbait, really sharing information that was misleading over the weekend. And so again, it's really, really important to make sure that you know where you're getting your information from and that you know you're getting it from people who are experienced and reliable. And also understand that good lawyers are going to disagree. Lots of us will disagree. We disagree all the time, right? And how this all plays out depends on a case. It depends on the laws applied to the case. It depends on the judge. It depends on the witnesses. It depends on the evidence that comes in. But I will just tell you, I would not be feeling very good right now if I were Donald Trump. And the other thing I will just say here is that apparently the prosecution, when it came in this morning, I'm going to remind you all, Alvin Bragg is not trying this case. There is a team of 3 lead prosecutors. There are doubtless a huge stack of assistant district attorneys backing them up. But they came in looking very relaxed. And my experience as a trial lawyer is that when you're looking relaxed and feeling relaxed the morning that a case starts, you generally know that you are as prepared as you could possibly be and that you think you've pretty much got a lock. Because otherwise you're like nervous, fiddling with your papers, back checking yourself. Apparently they were all like, we got this in their body language this morning. So, wow. Okay. So apparently there is a statement out of the judge right now that the judge is warning Donald Trump that if he doesn't show up, a warrant will be issued for his arrest. And Trump has said that he understands that. That's pretty amazing. We haven't had a statement like that so far in any of the stuff related to Donald Trump. The prosecutors are requesting, this is straight off the New York Times live feed, that Trump will be fined $1,000 for each violation, at least $3,000 in all for the current violations of the GAG order. That in and of itself is also significant because that's what has been happening. That those are the 3 violations so far, apparently. Mershon is saying he's not going to rule until after lunch. But again, I have to point out that this is a starter phase for the GAG order violations. And also the fact that he has now been warned that a warrant can issue for his arrest if he's not present is a very big deal. Okay. So things are moving. I mean, and you know, this is going to be the way it is all day today. There's a lot of pretrial stuff happening right now that is going to be moved in the right direction. Okay. Here we have Katie Fang. I'm doing this live on the air, you guys. I never do this, but this is fun. All right. So Trump is being read his Parker warning. Parker is a case that requires the judge to read him certain information at the advance of the trial. You have the right to be present during the trial and assist your attorneys. Do you understand? Trump, yes. If you disrupt the attorneys, you can be excluded from the courtroom and committed to jail based on your conduct, and the trial will continue in your absence. Do you understand? Trump, I do. If you do not show up, there will be an arrest warrant. Do you understand? I do. So Trump's on notice now that if he disrupts the trial, the judge can remove him to jail. It's a good day. I mean, this is like a good day. This is accountability right here, like live in real time. Okay. I think that this is all very significant. And I'm just going to tell you all also, as I've said like millions of times here over the last 7 years, Trump is a malignant narcissist. And that means that he cannot control his impulses. He will be very hard to control in this courtroom, particularly when the evidence of Stormy Daniels' affair with him, Karen McDougal's affair with him, their testimony is being entered into evidence. You can expect that he is not going to sit by quietly and respond well to that. So how this is all happening is going to be really fascinating to watch. But he's on notice now. if he disrupts the courtroom, if he outbursts in a way that the jury can hear, if he acts in such a way to demean a witness when a witness is on the stand, he's out of there and into jail. So this is a very significant moment. Okay. Very significant moment. And the news is breaking like bit by bit while we're live here on the air. Okay. All right. I think that's it for now. We're breaking for lunch in the trial, not surprising. As I said to everybody else, I am planning to be back here multiple times. I will just say, somebody's asking a question about, is it normal to allow a defendant to be present in sidebar combos? It depends. There are situations where the judge may want to speak directly to the defendant outside of, with his attorneys. Not unusual. There are also times where maybe not. So we're going to see the jury selection process begin very shortly, and we're off. So as I said, my plan right now is to be back here multiple times throughout the days of this trial, not just our usual scheduled hour, which is 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, 5 days a week, plus our Sunday coffee hour for Patreon subscribers. So again, I have to remind you all, I have a staff behind the scenes here who handle all of our technical stuff, who I pay. And also there's me, who is kind of turning over most of my professional working life to covering this trial and doing live analysis here for the next 6 weeks. So if you are a subscriber, you help me to feed my kids, and I'm a single mom, and I would greatly appreciate your subscriptions on Patreon if you have not yet done so. Patreon.com/ResistanceLive. Again, you can become a subscriber there for as little as $2 a month. It's a steal. Okay. And, you know, you consider it like a donation to NPR or PBS. It helps to support media that you care about, that is informing you and talking you off a ledge and celebrating with you and giving you information that you can use. All right. Much love to everyone. I will catch you all here probably later on today. All right. And the way that you will know that I am coming is if you are a subscriber on the Patreon feed, a question feed will go up early. And then there will be obviously a placeholder on YouTube for this after the fact. Reminder, if you have not liked this broadcast yet, please hit the thumbs up. And if you hit subscribe with the bell notification here on YouTube, you will be notified with a notification, including a pop-up, whenever I'm going live. All right. So much love to you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers for the financial support. And chances are very solid I will catch you here again later on today. All right. Thank you, my friends. It's a good day. Accountability has arrived. All right. I will see you here very soon. All right. Enjoy the rest of the day, everybody. Bye.